family gathered, sweet faces all familiar. No one's old and feeble anymore. Oh, my lonesome heart is crying. I'm gonna spread my wings and fly. I said I've never been this homesick before. I see the bright light shine. It's just about home time. Oh, I can see my mom standing by the door. This world is a wilderness. I'm ready for deliverance. Lord, I've never been this homesick before. Oh, I see the bright light shine. It's just about home time. Oh, I can see my mother standing by the door. This world, wilderness. I'm ready for deliverance. Lord, I've never been this homesick before. Lord, I've never been this homesick. I said this homesick before.
See the bright light shine. It's just about home time. Glory to God. One more time now. Praise the Lord.
Oh, I can see the family gathered, sweet faces all familiar. No one's old and feeble anymore. Oh, my lonesome heart is crying. I said I'm gonna spread my wings and fly. I've never been this homesick no more. I see the bright light shine. It's just about home time. I can see my father standing by the door. This world is a wilderness. I'm ready for deliverance. Lord, I've never been this homesick before. I see the bright light shine. It's just about home time. I can see my father standing by the door. This world has been a wilderness. I'm ready for deliverance. Lord, I've never been this homesick before. I said I've never been this homesick no more.
You're listening to WXPS FM 92.1, Sound of Truth Radio.
All in one accord, when the Holy Ghost descended.
You're listening to WXPS LP 92.1 FM in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And now, another Homeschool Minute with Nikki Corbin.
Another method of homeschooling is called the classical method. Now, I'll be honest, there's a lot of different methods, and some I know more about than others, and classical is probably one that I know very little about. But I do know that it is a method that would have been used years ago. It's a method that involves reading classic and learning from the classics. It's a method that involves, as far as like learning the language, learning Latin and learning perhaps Greek, learning the origin of different words, and so it's a method that I think is very good, and that the kids are learning a lot of great information. It involves a lot of perhaps memorization of things, reciting things. There's 3 stages to it. The first stage is dealing with grammar, and it is a lot of memorizing things. And then there's the second stage, which is called the dialectic stage. It involves logic and it involves debate and things like that taking place. And then the third stage is what's called the rhetoric stage, and it continues that systematic studies and continues to develop the persuasive use of language and things like that. So it's based on what was done many years ago, and it's a method that some parents use to teach their kids.
Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from a world of air. Men bids me at my Father's throne, makes all my wants
I've had many tears and sorrows, questions for tomorrow. There have been times I didn't know right from wrong, but through every situation, God gave consolation that these trials only come to make us strong. Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend on His word. I've been to a lot of places, and I've seen so many faces. There have been times I felt all alone, but you know, in those lonely, lonely hours, yes, those precious, lonely hours, I said that's when Jesus let me know that I'm His own. Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend on His word. You know, I thank God for the mountains. I thank Him for the valleys. I thank Him for the trials He's brought me through. You see, if I never had a problem, I wouldn't know how that God could solve them. And I wouldn't know how that faith in God could bring me through. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. You know, through it all, yes, through it all, I've come to trust in Jesus. And I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, no matter what it's been, through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. Sean, play that again one more time, please.
You're listening to WXPS LP 92.1 FM in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Matthew Corbin here, live on Sound of Truth Radio. I apologize that we are running more than a few minutes behind, and again, I do apologize for that. But I am here live in studio with a special guest, and that guest being my mother, Pastor Nikki Corbin. Mother, if you'd just like to say hello so the radio
Hello.
listeners know you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, it's great to have her with us tonight. And again, I apologize for running so late. We were working on some last-minute technical stuff. But we are here to have a discussion with you all about our sheriff's race that is coming up just a week from tomorrow. Just a week from tomorrow is going to be the election here in Spartanburg County. Now, I know that we have listeners from all around the country, so to some of you it's not relevant, but those of you here where our FM station is based, our local home base of Sound of Truth Radio, you have a very important election coming up here in just a week. On August 5th, Tuesday, August 5th, that will be the day of the Republican primary for Spartanburg County Sheriff. Now, you might be thinking, I don't really want to vote in the Republican primary. Well, that's really the only election we're going to have because there's no one registered to run for sheriff at this time except for Republicans. So who the next sheriff of Spartanburg County is really going to be determined in this Republican primary. So what I'm saying is, whether you consider yourself a Republican or not, if you want to have a say in this election, you've got to vote in the Republican primary on August 5th. Also, if we don't have any candidate that reaches 50% plus one, they're able to hit half of the vote and plus one extra vote. If no candidate does that on primary day, then there will be a second primary 2 weeks later. On August 19th, we will have what we call a runoff election here in Spartanburg County, and that will be held between the top two vote getters on August 5th. So the normal primary election is Tuesday, August 5th, and if nobody goes over 50% that day, then 2 weeks later, exactly 2 weeks later, August 19th, we will have another election between the top two vote getters from August 5th. So I hate to tell you, but we might have to ask you to vote twice. This is very important. Mother, if you wouldn't mind, would you share why you think it's important for Christians especially to be voting in this election?
Well, for any election, I feel like the Christians should be involved. I mean, because otherwise you're going to have the people who are making all the decisions are just people who are without God. And we, I know that politics is a controversial thing, and some church circles and people say it needs to stay out. Choose what kind of leaders we have in our country. And when you look like in church history, you look in the Bible and you see the persecution that they would undergo at times when they did not have godly leadership. I mean, how foolish are we to have the opportunity to vote and then not vote? I think obviously we need to be making sure that we have leaders who are going to hold up the standard of the Bible as much as possible, and that's in every election. But yes, the sheriff election is definitely very important. The county I tell people all the time that your county government is really what impacts your life the most. And it's kind of funny because I know people who will vote in the presidential election, but they don't vote in any other election. And I'm always like, I want you to vote in the presidential election. That's important. But look, your county elections, those impact your life really a lot more because those are the ones who are deciding your county level laws and legislation and things like that. And so we have a county council actually. Some of you may be listening who get to vote in the county council election. That's important. Not everybody gets to vote in that one. So if you are able to, by all means, be a part of that. And then all of Spartanburg County does get to vote in the sheriff election. And again, those leaders are the ones that impacts our lives the most. And we need to make sure we have leaders who are going to hold up that biblical standard. Absolutely. Amen. Very well put. We've got to be voting in this election. I'm going to try to keep an eye on our Facebook stream if I can. I've also got some notes here on my phone I'm looking at. I don't know if maybe you can help monitor Facebook, because if you have any questions about the race, if I know the answer, I would love to be able to answer them for you. So if you're listening on the FM right now, you didn't even know we had a Facebook stream. Our Facebook page is Sound of Truth Radio. We also have a YouTube channel, Truth Chapel West Church. Now, it's going to be kind of difficult. There's only the two of us here in studio today, so it's going to be difficult to manage all that. But if I can't promise we'll see your comment. I just have to let you know we might miss it. We've got a lot of technical stuff we're trying to work with while also hosting the program at the same time. We don't have anyone else working with us right now, but I'm going to try
to keep a monitor on that. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in, or if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, and hopefully we'll be able to get to your question. I can't guarantee it, but hopefully we will. So as my mother just said, we've got to be voting this election on August 5th. Let's talk about, and then I want to get to the specific candidates, because we had the great privilege here on this radio station to interview every candidate for the election, and I'm very honored that we got to do that. I want to especially thank Andy Clark for being the first one to agree to come on here, because we haven't interviewed a candidate for political office since 2018 probably. So it's been a long time since we've done political candidate interviews on here. So for Andy Clark to be willing to do that, that built some credibility. When I went to other candidates, I could say, yeah, we've already had Andy Clark and Randy Hollifield. I can name the ones we've already had, and that will make them more likely to get on here. So I do want to especially thank Andy Clark for being the first one we had on here. The first one we have is actually Joseph Hawes. He dropped out of the race, but behind the scenes, Andy Clark was the first one to agree to come on here. So that still stands to thank him especially. But I'm thankful to all the candidates. That, again, all 9 of them, even Adam Crisp, who a lot of people have struggled to get interviews with, but he was willing to come on here, and I'm very thankful for that. And so we want to kind of just give you some highlights of some things that they said in our interviews. Now, we're not going to be able to cover everything. Each interview is about an hour long, so we've got almost 9 hours worth of content for you. Check it out on our YouTube channel, Truth Chapel World Evangelism Fellowship Church. We have a playlist set that says Spartanburg County Sheriff Interviews 2025. Go to that playlist and you can watch the whole interviews. So I got to tell you what we're going to be talking about today. We're not going to be able to give you the full picture. We just can't. And I'll try to be fair to the candidates, but I just have to let you know there's going to be a lot more information you could get out of those interviews. So go check them out if you haven't yet. I want to talk about the specific candidates, but before we do, let's just talk about this. What issue should be important to a Christian in this election? And I'll just try to explain some of the questions we ask the candidates that I think are important to Christians, and I hope you do as well. We asked them about lockdowns and how they would have handled COVID. I phrased this, how would you have handled COVID? And that phrasing was recommended by a member of our church, Brother Jeff. I said, how would you have handled COVID? Not just, would you lock us down? Because how would you have handled COVID is maybe a little more broad, so it lets them kind of... I'll put it this way. If they're a liberal candidate for sheriff, I want to give them a chance to expose themselves as that. I don't want to ask the question in a way that baits a very obvious answer. So I tried not to do that. I probably did do it some, but I tried not to. We asked them about lockdowns, about shutting down churches. What does that have to do with the sheriff? Well, the sheriff enforces those orders. Sheriff Chad Chronister in Florida threw preachers in jail because they reopened their churches when DeSantis had lockdown orders in place. So it's very important who the sheriff is, because they're going to be the one enforcing mandates like that. They're going to be the one who, they're either going to come and knock on your door and say you're going to jail because you had church during a quote-unquote emergency, or they're going to be the ones that say, you know what, you can still have church anyway.
Right.
So,
that was important to us. At True Chapel, we did not close down during COVID. We continued right on having services. And for us, we knew, like, at that point, we had Chuck Wright. Chuck Wright. And honestly, I know that he's controversial right now, but we knew that he would not.
Well, we called and asked.
Yeah.
Daddy called and asked.
But we knew the kind of things he stood for and everything, that he would be the kind of person who would not throw us into jail for having church. But we did have a little bit of concern with the city police, because we're actually located in the city, so we were kind of like, they're not necessarily as conservative as the county level. And so there was those concerns of are we going to get in trouble for doing this? And we were determined we're going to go ahead and do it, but still that was something that we had to weigh and pray about.
Exactly.
And so we want somebody who is going to protect churches, going to protect really everyone's civil liberties, and making sure that the government doesn't overstep those liberties, because I always tell people, when you let the government start taking things away, sometimes you're okay with what they're taking away because it doesn't impact you, but the day's going to come that it is something that impacts you, and so you've got to ask, is it worth letting them take this away? Right
on. We asked them about gun rights, which I know some would say, how's that a Christian issue? Firstly, it's the right in our Constitution, and I'm not saying the Constitution is a perfect document, but let me say this about the Constitution. The Constitution was made to be a promise on which our government was built. And if the government's not upholding the Constitution, it doesn't have to uphold anything. And what I mean is, if you don't have a foundation to your building, you don't have a building at all. I'm not saying the Constitution is perfect, but as long as we have a Constitution, it only makes sense to follow it, in my opinion, because otherwise you just have basically anarchy. You could just do whatever. And I know I'm saying anarchy. The government could just make whatever laws that it wants if there's not something restraining it. So even if the Constitution is not perfect, it's a much needed restraint. And some of you maybe believe that it is perfect. We won't get into that conversation. But gun rights, it's important for us to have that right to defend ourselves. You know, Jesus told his disciples, he said, sell your coat and buy a sword. And I know I know the believer, we're not to be always on the warpath against people. And we're not talking about being on the warpath, but we're talking about just having the ability to defend yourself and to defend others without the government infringing on that. What does that have to do with the sheriff? Folks, if they do red flag laws, guess who's going to be coming to collect your firearm? I know they could use the FBI, but it could also go through the sheriff's department. What the sheriff tells their deputies, here's how you react when you come across someone carrying a firearm. You know, and if someone's carrying it and they're not causing any harm, the deputy shouldn't give them any trouble, and the sheriff's going to set the tone for that. So we asked them about gun rights. We asked them about efficiency and cost saving, taxes, because I think it's only fair if they're going to be funded off of our money, which they are, tax money they've taken from us, they should be wise stewards of it. So we asked them about that, how they could possibly maybe save some money in the sheriff's department and not increase taxes. Do you have anything to add to those gun rights, taxes? Okay, I'm trying to hurry through here. I'm sorry, but we got a lot of clips we want to play, a lot of stuff we want to talk about, so I apologize if my tone sounds rushed. Again, we were running late. That's my fault, and I apologize. But another big thing we asked them about, we asked many questions, but another big thing that's controversial, and some of our listeners might disagree with me on this, but we asked them, and most of them, some of them we didn't get to ask this question, but we asked most of them about Operation Rolling Thunder and civil asset forfeiture. Now, notice a controversial topic, but what's been happening in the sheriff's department? You just spoke well of Chuck Wright, and I'm glad that you did, because he was a sheriff that we knew. We knew Chuck Wright was okay with us carrying guns. We ran into him at the shooting range.
Oh, yeah.
We knew he was fine. We knew he was a sheriff who wanted us to have church. So there were good things about Sheriff Wright. Please don't misunderstand me. But one thing that went on under his administration that I personally disagree with, and you might disagree with me, and that's fine. You don't have to come to the same conclusion as me. But one thing I disagree with was the practice of pulling over cars, finding a reason, an excuse to pull over a car, and then searching it. And this is what they would do during what they called Operation Rolling Thunder. They would go out there on I-85. They would team up with other law enforcement agencies. They would pull over cars. They would search it and the purpose was to stop drug trafficking. They would search it for drugs or for drug money. But they pulled over too many people. You say, what do you mean? But listen, it's been found, and this is news agencies have put this out, that over 72% of the searches they conducted, they didn't find anything illegal. So that means over 72% of the people they pulled over and then searched. And here's the thing, the Fourth Amendment says that you have a right to not be searched, not have your persons or your papers or your property searched without a warrant or without probable cause. And they would search, I would argue, unconstitutionally, and 72% of the time it was nothing. There was nothing there. They just searched you. And they would take things like cash. Even if they couldn't prove that it was drug money, they would say, well, it must be drug money. They would take the cash. They would use it in the sheriff's department. Very controversially, Chuck Wright took someone's 2012 Ford Raptor and decided to use it for himself. And I guess he said it was connected to drugs. I don't know the full story on that, and I'm not here to tell you the full story on that. But that's been a controversial thing in Chuck Wright's administration. He did a lot of good as sheriff, don't misunderstand me. But that's one thing that I always disagreed with was taking things from people, at the very least, without charging them for a crime. Chuck Wright said in an interview one time, well, something to this effect, it's easier for me to just take it than have to prove in court that, it was actually that they did something wrong. I could just go ahead and take it, and then we'll just let it be. I don't think it's very respectful of our rights. I understand that he thinks these people were drug dealers. I get it. But I think we don't want a government that is so big that it can take stuff from us without due process. Listen, I don't hate Chuck Wright, don't misunderstand me, but we just need due process. That's my big thing. And so I asked him about that. and had some interesting answers there. Do you have anything to share about that topic?
No.
Do you think I explained it well enough? So I want to make sure you
Yeah.
guys don't I don't want to make sure I don't misunderstand me, and I want you to know we're not pro-drugs or pro-drug dealer, and I don't have a problem with pulling people over. I don't have a problem with taking drug money. The problem is searching too much and seizing from people without actually charging them with a crime, without actually having any proof of it. And you know, to me, stuff like taking someone's truck and using it for yourself, that just rubs me the wrong way. Maybe not you, but it just, to me, that doesn't jive. So.
Yeah, and some of the candidates did bring up, when you asked them questions about that, they did bring up how, you know, somebody might have cash, a bunch of cash, because they're going to go buy a new car, or go buy, you know, buy a boat or something like that. And so to just assume it's drug money just because they got a lot of cash in the car is not necessarily true. In fact, just this past week, Jeremiah, my son, bought a truck, and we had cash in the car, quite a bit of cash. And I actually thought about, you know, well, I'm glad they don't do that anymore, because, you know, somebody might question, why do we have this cash? Well, we were going to go buy him a truck, so that's why.
If you had been riding out on I-85 with that cash, you might have been in trouble.
Yeah.
But yes, Sheriff Jeffrey Stevens, the interim sheriff, has ended Operation Rolling Thunder. And what's interesting is he did that during the interviews. So we had maybe a couple interviews before, or we had one interview now, just Andy Clark, before he ended it. And actually Andy and Randy, I think it did before he ended it, and the rest after. So I think, and again, I know you're thinking, how's that a Christian issue? Because I don't think it's Christian to take stuff from people without going through the proper process. And I'm not saying Chuck Wright always did it wrong. Please don't misunderstand me. But I do think there have been some abuses. Whether it was him personally or just some of his deputies, whatever. There's been some abuses. And so I wanted to see a candidate who would say, let's make sure we're using due process, and we're not just seizing just so we can make money, just so we can make profit. Because let's be honest, that's what was going on. It's going to be real.
We want to make sure there's no crookedness going on in the law enforcement.
Right.
I mean, and I know it's going to happen, but as much as possible, we need a sheriff who's going to keep the crooked stuff out.
Right. Okay, we are now almost halfway through the hour. Again, we were about 9 minutes late getting started. I so apologize for that. I feel that I've let you all down, but hopefully this conversation so far has already been good. We're talking about the Spartanburg County Sheriff's election, which will be on August 5th. That's a Republican primary, so go to your precinct and ask for a Republican ballot on August 5th, and then possibly we'll have a runoff on August 19th. We've been telling you that a Christian should vote, and talk about some of the issues maybe we should vote on. Do you have any other issues you want to bring up before we go through the candidates? All right. Then let's get to the candidates. We'll go through them one by one, and we'll have to be brief. I kind of wish this was a 2-hour or 3-hour discussion. I don't, because I would get very tired. But I wish it was, just so we can go into more depth, because there's a lot to say about these candidates. For the purposes of this radio station, we're going to focus on what they said in their interviews. I know there are a lot of rumors going around about certain candidates. I know there's a lot of stuff in the news. I know there's stuff they've said in other interviews. You need to research that stuff too. I'd be careful with the rumors, because everyone's got skeletons in their closet, so I wouldn't go picking at the skeletons too much, because we're all sinners. But you definitely need to do more research outside this interview, just to be honest with you. Please don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say this real quick. You know, I'll say also that a lot of the candidates in our interaction, both before the interviews and even during the interviews, I would say they are nice people.
Oh yeah.
Several of them, at least, had, you know, very strong testimonies about the Lord. They seem to love God. Several of them made comments to us about how they felt like the Lord was leading them to do this. Now, of course, they all admitted that obviously they're not all going to win. But they felt like even if it was just to be door knocking right now, that maybe God has them doing this for, you know, a purpose and everything, even though the ultimate purpose may not be to become sheriff, because only one of them is going to be sheriff. And but so several of them, you know, very kind, respectful, just nice people. But you know, understanding that we're not just we're not going to throw them out based on maybe rumors that we hear, and we're also not going to vote for them just because they're nice people.
Yes,
we need
exactly.
to know where do they stand on issues. And even though several of them, very nice people, would love to sit down and have dinner with them, but doesn't necessarily mean I need to vote for them for sheriff. And so we've got to look at the issues and make a vote based on that.
Yep. And if you didn't know, she was here for just about all the interviews. I think you missed Randy Hollifield, maybe another or two, but you were here.
I think I just missed one. Yeah.
Okay. You were here for just about all the interviews, so she met most of the candidates, and I'll say all of them were nice people. I mean, all of them were at least polite. Some, different personalities mesh in different ways. So some, I guess, I kind of got along with more than others. But none of them were mean or anything to that extent. So very kind people. Again, for the purposes of this little discussion tonight, we're just going to focus on what they said in the interview. And you need to do more research outside of that. And you hit a good point. Don't just vote based on who knocked on your door and had a nice smile.
Yeah.
Look at the issues. Look where they stand. And I know you're probably thinking this. Look at where they say they stand, but we have to take it all with a grain of salt. Except for Rusty Clevenger and Adam Crisp, none of the rest of these guys have ever held elected office before.
Right.
So we really, they could be lying. They could be pulling our string. They could be stringing us along. Unfortunately, it's just a risk we're going to have to take.
Right.
We got to vote based
right
on
now, we
how
have to take their word for it.
We got to vote on how they say that they're going to do, and then we'll have the next. Actually, they won't serve for 4 years because this is just a partial term to finish out Chuck Wright's term. So we'll have the next, I guess, 3 years to figure out if they really do what they said.
And I know some wonder, are they being honest? Well, all we can do right now is take their word.
Yeah.
And then if they are not being honest, then next time we get to make some changes. But for right now, we're just having to take them at their word.
Right. All right, so let's get into the candidates. I don't want to waste any more time. We'll go through them in order that we interviewed them, and I'll try to play at least one clip for each candidate. We'll see how much time allows. The first one that we interviewed was Andy Clark. He is a retired sheriff's deputy. I can't tell you his whole story, everything, because, again, you need to go back and watch the interview for that. We only have a little bit of time here today. But Andy Clark's the first one we interviewed, has an emphasis on technology. He actually has an IT background, emphasis on transparency. One thing that I heard Andy Clark say in the interview many times, and that I've seen him say online many times, is we've got to let the community know why we're doing what we're doing. And I've seen people ask him questions even online. Again, I'm trying to focus on what we said in the interview, but he made the statement, I think, a couple times in the interview. People ask about this, that, or the other, and he kind of comes back to the point of, well, let's just communicate with the people. I think he's talked about increasing the social media presence maybe of the Sheriff's Department as one of the ways to be more transparent and just to explain to the people what they are doing. I think that's commendable. But it's not the end-all, be-all, because a robber can tell me, hey, I'm robbing you, but that doesn't mean what he's doing is right. So transparency is good, but do you see what I'm saying? Your transparency is good. It's good that you tell me what you're doing and why you're doing it, but that's not the end-all, be-all. You've also got to do the right thing.
Right.
And I'm not saying he's not going to do the right thing. Don't misunderstand me. Don't read to what I didn't say. I'm not trying to throw shade at him. I'm just saying that I need to hear more than just we're going to explain to you why we're doing what we're doing. I've got some clips here from him that maybe we'll play. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share about Andy Clark and if he made an impression on you? Okay, we talked to him about many of the issues that we just mentioned. He says he supports the Second Amendment. Let me get you an example here of, I think in this clip, he kind of says the thing of, let's just explain to the people why we're doing what we're doing. And this is on the issue of civil asset forfeiture. So this is a clip. And y'all are going to say, oh, they're editing it to bias certain people. Look, we had to do short clips. The full interviews are still online. So go watch the full interviews, please, for more context. But this was Andy Clark on the civil asset forfeiture issue, that issue of the Sheriff's Department taking things from people, which I am personally against, at least without due process. So here he is on that. I think, to me, this kind of the way he answers this says a lot about his candidacy, him as a candidate.
So I don't think there was an issue with cash. These people only see, hey, they're seizing cash.
Yeah.
They might not see, what goes along with it.
Sure.
One of the things is I would love to sit there and go, hey, if you have a question, let's bring you in. Let's show the case. Here's the case, and this is why. Do those check box. This is why we did what we did.
So you're not necessarily opposed to maybe the current policy on that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct assessment. But is it also correct to say that you are advocating for a lot of transparency with why
Yes.
you're doing what you're
Yes.
doing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, fair. On that, is that correct? Correct assessment. But is it also correct to say that you are advocating for a lot of transparency with why you're doing what you're doing? Yep. Okay. Okay, fair. All right, I apologize. There's a little bit of a delay here. The audio I messed up a little bit. So that was Andy Clark. Talk about civil asset forfeiture. Again, what I heard, what I got out of that is we're still going to do it. We're just going to tell you why we're doing it. And that's kind of, and this was just a few days. We did an interview with Andy Clark before Jeffrey Stevens announced he was ending Operation Rolling Thunder. It was just a few days before. And I'm going to be honest, I was interviewing Andy Clark. I thought, man, if I ask all these sheriff candidates this question, they're all just going to be like, well, we have to do it. We'll just explain to you why we're doing it. And I was like, man, this is rough. And then a couple days later, the interim sheriff says, I'm ending Operation Rolling Thunder. And I said, well, praise the Lord, I'm not the only one who saw a problem with this kind of stuff. And just to be honest, I kind of think that it kind of made Andy Clark look bad, that he kind of defended it. I don't have the clip for this, but he said in our interview, he said he doesn't have a problem with Operation Rolling Thunder. He just thinks maybe they should do it less frequently, I think is what he said. He said he don't have a problem. A few days later, the interim sheriff says, yeah, it's out. And I think public opinion is largely that it should be out. So that's kind of an issue that I have there with Andy Clark. And again, I really appreciate him being willing to come on the station. He was the first one to agree to come on here. But I think there's maybe too much of a... I'll just say on that issue, he was weak. He was weak. And his answer just came down to, yeah, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. I'm just going to tell you why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. That don't really fly for me. Did you have any thoughts you want to share on that? Now, one place where Andy Clark was really strong for me was when we talked about lockdowns, and I asked him, and I tried to ask it in a way that it wasn't totally clear what my stance was, so maybe I could get an honest stance out of him. And he told me straight to my face, yes, as sheriff, I would have the right to decide what to enforce and not to enforce. And he kind of said I wouldn't enforce lockdowns, but I'm going to be honest, he wasn't as strong on that either as I wanted.
Yeah. Because
he said, well, we could talk to the business owners. Hey, Sunday night, let's come in there and let's disinfect everything. And I'm thinking, that ain't the sheriff's job.
Yeah.
I don't need the sheriff knocking on a businessman's door saying, let's talk about how we can disinfect. So it's kind of, he said that he would not enforce lockdown orders. He said that he believed as sheriff he had the right to enforce or not to enforce certain things. And I appreciate that. He was bold in saying that. Mm-hmm. But then he kind of had this idea of, well, we'll work with the businesses to help them disinfect and things. And I mean, he didn't say necessarily the deputies being there disinfecting. He didn't say that, so I'm not going to put words in his mouth. But he talked about it as if he as sheriff it's his job to give
compromise.
Yeah. And we'll just play that clip for you. I will let Andy Clark speak for himself here. So give me just a second. I'm all a mess here trying to do the technical and talking at the same time. But
This is Cross Preaching for Spartanburg, WX.
McMaster, whoever's in the governor's mansion after him, is issuing executive orders. Do you believe that you kind of have some ability to determine whether or not to enforce those executive orders?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah. We have to come together on an agreement. Hey, do you mind, and there's these people who do have legitimate, illness that if they are compromised, let's work together. Let's say, hey, on Mondays, let's go in the grocery store. Let's, make sure everything's clean on Sunday nights. Let's make it sterile. And if you want to come in on Mondays, let's come in on Mondays and let you shop and, wear your mask and everything, and then come on in. And
the state government was telling you, hey, you need to kind of enforce the order here, but business owner tells you, I'm just fine the way I am. What's your...
the business owner has to understand the risk.
Sure.
And I think they did. They do. And, let's keep them open.
This is Cross Preaching for Spartanburg, WXPS 92.1 FM.
All right, so that was Andy Clark talking about the lockdowns. Mother, any thoughts on that?
That was weak.
Yeah, again, I really appreciate Andy Clark, especially for being the first one to agree to come here on this station. But Yeah, that was not as strong as I had wanted. So I've got to move on for the sake of time. Andy Clark, I don't mean to give you a bad rap, but we've got a lot of other things to talk about. I'll just say this really quick. He also talked about making sure all officers have body cams, bringing in drones, talked about increasing social media presence. I think he would be very good at upgrading the technology of the sheriff's department.
Yeah,
He does have
that
an
is definitely
IT
good.
background, and
Yeah.
he's very I would say technology focused. I don't know if he would want that label or not, but I consider that a good thing. I do.
Yeah.
But on the questions of civil asset forfeiture, lockdowns, I think very weak. And he was fine on the Second Amendment. He said he supported it. Not really anything to write home about there. I'm not. By the way, we're not really here to tell you who to vote for. We're just trying to kind of point out some pros and cons of each candidate. I like his technology stance. I think he was kind of weak on some of the liberty questions. Do
Yeah.
you have anything to add to that?
I agree.
All right, then we will move on to Randy Hollifield. And guys, I feel so bad rushing through these, and I hope none of them send me angry emails that have given them a bad reputation. But I want to encourage you one more time. You can go watch the full interview. So if you think I'm slanting one way or another, go watch the full interviews and let it speak for itself on our YouTube channel, Truth Chapel World Evangelism Fellowship Church. The next one we interviewed was Captain Randy Hollifield. He has been a sheriff's deputy since 2005. Before that, he was with Duncan, Landrum, Greenville counties. He actually has a very long law enforcement career, going back, I think he's like 40 years, somewhere around there. So very long law enforcement career. He really, I'm going to be honest, I messed up with the Randy Hollifield interview, and I didn't get to ask him all my questions, and I'm taking the blame for that because I didn't really give him an idea of how many questions I wanted to ask him, or I didn't give him an idea for how much time I wanted to spend on each question. So we ended up taking more time on each question with Captain Hollifield than I would have wanted to. So I didn't get to ask him all my questions. So I apologize for that. It's my fault. I didn't get to ask him everything I wanted to. But what we did get, he did, kind of like Andy Clark, talk about some technology changes we can make. But otherwise, from what I understood from Captain Hollifield, is a lot of it was kind of, he would say something to this effect, and I don't have a clip of him saying this, but he would say, continue the good work they're doing at the sheriff's office. And I understood that he would be a candidate who wants to, I don't want to say status quo, but in many ways continue things the way that they are.
Yeah.
Which is not the worst, I don't think. We don't have, goodness no, we certainly don't have the worst sheriff's office out there, and Chuck Wright was not the worst sheriff.
No.
I'm going to say, in spite of the recent scandals, he wasn't. So I don't have a huge problem with that, but I guess I would maybe have appreciated a little bit more of a vision for some new ideas, which I didn't see as much with him as I wanted to. Let me play you this clip. This was to me, the most concerning thing with Captain Hollifield, and I just want to say this before I play this clip. He was one of the nicest to talk to and hang out with. I mean, he was great and very easy to converse with. But when we asked him about gun rights, he shared this little story that's kind of caused me to pause. Maybe it won't be a big deal to you, but we'll play it and we'll let you make of it what you.
I did a gun class. I taught some concealed weapon classes.
Okay.
And there were some classes that I did that.
Hello, this is Scott Corbin from WXPS Radio, and I want to ask you a question. Is this radio station a blessing to you? If that is the case, I want to ask.
I did a gun class. I taught some concealed weapon classes.
Okay.
And there were some classes that I did that I was extremely honest with the folks and said, listen, I don't know that you owning a pistol, shotgun, weapon, I just don't know that it would be good for you just because of the ability to use that firearm.
Yeah.
I would hate to know that somebody took a firearm from somebody just because they were unable to handle it. Now, the alternative to that was a lady asked me, said, all right, then what can I do? I said, well, this is what you do. I said, you go to the store all the time and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a can of wasp spray. It's got 21 foot, and you see a I said, you know what? Can you spray these wasps? Yes, sir, I can. I said, well, guess what? Then you get you a can of wasp spray. You set it close to your door. You set it on a counter. And if you got issues with somebody coming in your house, I said, spray them with the wasp spray. They're going to leave.
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I am not the most impressed with a sheriff's candidate who shares a story about how he told someone not to carry a gun. Look, I'm not saying gun ownership is for everyone, but wasp spray? Again, I just have some pause there. I have some pause with the idea of a sheriff who discourages gun ownership and who was teaching I guess you said, a concealed weapons permit class, and instead of being patient with someone and teaching them how to better handle their firearm, he told her, I'm going to be honest, wasp spray ain't the same as a firearm. And I guess his idea is someone tries to break in your house, you just spray their eyes or something. But look, that's not the same as when you're in a situation in public, there's an active shooter situation, and you can do something to protect other people. I'm sorry, that wasp spray is not the same as a firearm. So I had an issue with that. Again, Captain Hollifield is a very, very nice person to talk to, but I think he's very weak on the gun issue. And I don't want a sheriff who discourages people from carrying. Isn't to say everyone should carry, that's between you and the Lord, but I have a problem with that. Do you have any thoughts there?
Not
Mother?
really, no.
Okay. Another thing with Captain Hollifield, I'll play this. It's just an 8-second clip, so it'll be real quick. Very, very reluctant when we asked about, budget cuts, efficiency. Very reluctant to say that there could be. And we apologize for all the technical glitches. It's all my fault. But I kind of understood from him, let's not take anything out of the budget. And I hope I didn't misunderstand him. I think every candidate, when asked, would you support cost-saving measures, are all going to say yes. But I think I maybe sensed some reluctance from him, so I'll just play this clip real quick here, if I can get it played. Here we go.
Because once you cut something and it's gone, then you need it back. It's kind of hard to get it back.
Listen on your radio, on Roku, on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. We've got you covered on WXPS Sound of Truth Radio.
All right, so did you hear that? Once you cut something and it's gone, it's hard to get it back. And yeah, I kind of took that to mean, I'm not looking to cut anything. Which, I don't know the sheriff's department budget, so maybe there's nothing we can cut. Maybe it's all necessary. Maybe there's nothing we can cut. I'm not going to really debate that super hard, but I'd like to see a little more of an attitude of we can make some cuts, we can save some money. Any more thoughts on anything on Randy Hollifield overall?
No.
All right, we've got to hurry. We've only got 10 minutes left, though I don't think we have anything scheduled on PAL script for 6, so in theory we could go over. I don't know if you're up for that or not. I know 6:30 is the Bible reading, so we definitely got to be off by then. The next one we interviewed was Bill Ryan. Bill Ryan has been a highway patrolman, a state trooper, I guess is what you would call that, for many years. He was a sheriff's deputy previously. He also has many years of law enforcement. He's been on the news as a spokesperson for the Highway Patrol, so you might have even seen him or heard him before. He put a big emphasis on community-oriented policing and also on spiritual matters. When you look at Bill Ryan's platform, and we talked about it in our interview with him, he talks a lot about getting more pastors involved with the sheriff's office, about getting more volunteer chaplains, and getting, let me see if I can find here the exact phrase he used, a pastoral advisory board, and also getting pastors to support deputies. He says that's part of deputies' mental health, is getting pastors plugged in with the sheriff's office where deputies can call them, and the pastors can kind of be a someone for them to lean on. And he says, and I think he's probably right, that being a sheriff's deputy is very taxing, emotionally, spiritually. Now, that sounds like a great idea, I think, to the Christian voter, but I have to be honest, when I first read that on his website, I was kind of concerned, because also on his website, he said we will be inclusive in faiths, and there will be, I'm not phrasing it the exact right way, and actually I think he's changed his website a little bit since I first viewed it, funnily enough, but he talked about inclusivity, and I just got concerned, and he also said that the purpose of these pastors is not to force faith on anyone. So I had 2 questions for him, and I asked him, and I'm going to be honest, my fears were kind of calmed after what I heard him say in the when I asked him those questions. His answers are better than I expected, but I was concerned about the whole pastoral advisory board thing because I was concerned with two things. Firstly, that pastors will not be allowed to tell deputies you've got to get saved, because he said no forcing faith on people. I thought, okay, well, does that mean that the pastors are just there just to kind of say, just be motivational speakers, just be Joel Osteen type pastors, and not really preach the truth? That was a huge concern that I had. And secondly, he talked about inclusivity, and I thought, well, does that mean that if there's a Muslim deputy, you're going to make sure that there's a Muslim faith leader in your pastoral group? Are you going to have a Hindu leader there? So I had some questions about that. I asked him those questions. I will play for you his response. You can see what it is that he said to that when I asked him those questions. And, again, for me personally, I was satisfied with his response. I had fears, but he kind of helped dissuade those. So here is Bill Ryan answering my questions about that little pastoral support idea. You mentioned the pastor's not necessarily there to push faith on the people now. I don't really know a great way to ask it, but would these pastors be allowed to share if they felt like, hey, you need to get saved, sir? Is that an appropriate conversation, or is that not really what you're looking for?
No, that's
in this
not. That absolutely is an appropriate conversation, and I would leave that really to the pastors to make that decision. If that door's, and pastors are good, and I want to also be understood. It's not one faith; it'll be multiple spiritual backgrounds.
What about other faiths and religions that are non-Christian?
We're going to look at every avenue out there when we start to look at that pastoral support team. Now, I'll be very quite frank and honest with you. I believe in the Christian faith being the primary goal of what we're looking for.
All right, so to me, that kind of dispelled my fears a little bit. And I was worried about the issue of them not being able to lead deputies to the Lord, actually for salvation. But he said that could be an appropriate conversation if the pastor believes that it is. He said I would leave it up to the pastors. And as far as my concerns about other faiths, he basically said, no, I'm really just looking for the Christian faith. Now, he did say multiple denominations within that faith. Look, I'm going to say this. If it was me running for sheriff, that wouldn't be in my platform, probably. And I know you're thinking, man, that's crazy. Matthew, you're a preacher, and you wouldn't have that in the platform. But the reason why is because you're going to get into these lawsuits with separation of church and state. You're going to get these liberals come in, and they're going to say, well, if you have Christian pastors that active in the sheriff's department, you're going to have a Hindu spiritual leader.
Right.
It's just
I think it's a commendable thing, but I also think it's a dangerous thing because you are opening up the possibility of, as crazy as people are these days, you're opening up some risk. Yeah.
Just give the deputies enough time off to go to church, and just as their boss, tell them, hey, bud, I think you need to go to church.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. But anyway, honestly, I don't think it's the worst plan ever.
No. Yeah.
I thought it was going to be worse than it was. When I asked him questions about it, I was like, okay, I see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
He, at least from what he says, he does want it to be Christian pastors. And he is okay with
I think he wants the right thing. It is, but it is kind of concerning about what it could happen.
But I think it's not the worst plan. As you said, he wants the right thing. We are running so low on time. Mother, do we have permission to run a little bit over 6?
That's fine.
Okay, we're going to run a little bit over time because we ran a little bit behind coming in, so praise the Lord for that. Just a few more things about Bill Ryan. I mean, that was a big thing to me that was unique about him. Not everyone else has a plank of their platform about pastors. That was very unique. Again, it was a concern of mine at first, but as I asked him, I was like, okay, you know what, that's not, the way he's envisioning it is not the worst. As I said, he talks a lot about community-oriented policing and transparency. Outside of our interviews, Bill Ryan was the first candidate to release his whole personnel file. At least he claims it's his full personnel file from his years of service. Some other candidates have followed suit, like Andy Clark, Nick Duncan, Robert Cheeks, I believe, has, and maybe some others. He said that he supports constitutional carry, that he does have some safety concerns, wants to make sure people are trained and know what they're doing with their firearm, but he said, yes, I support constitutional carry. He was, I'm going to be honest, I don't think as strong on the lockdowns as I wanted him to be, and definitely not as strong on civil asset forfeiture. So I'm going to play both of these clips actually real quick if I can. The lockdown one and the civil asset forfeiture one, and you will see maybe these answers will do it for you. To me, just not quite as strong as I wanted. So here's Bill Ryan on those.
Yeah, so I kind of struggle with civil asset forfeiture if there's not a charge involved.
Gotcha.
I understand what state law says, but I do struggle with that aspect. I don't necessarily have an absolute 100% stance on it because, when you start talking about seizing amounts of money, when you don't have a charge other than the fact that they've got this lump sum of money, that's just really a gray area. Now, would we talk to the business owners and tell them, hey, can we do this, and try and work with them and work with them in a fair, impartial way to where we could come to a good conclusion? Yes. But to say that I would ever have my officers go in there and shut businesses down or arrest business owners for that, I don't see it, because look, the reality at the end of the day is when businesses started opening up, they did a great job of ensuring that they were following DHEC guidelines. And I don't know that we really dealt with that here. And hopefully that would never be something that we would deal with.
So his answer on civil asset forfeiture was, I don't really have a 100% stance on that. Now, I'll say this earlier on in the campaign, so it's possible he has kind of fine-tuned his stance on that since then, because we interviewed a lot of these interviews we did kind of early on in the campaign. Some of these guys have only been announced for a couple weeks when we got them here in the studio. So it was relatively early, but, not necessarily a bad stance. I would have appreciated something a little bit stronger on civil asset forfeiture and lockdowns. What did you think about the lockdown answer? I felt it was good, but I think he said something along the line of kind of working with businesses as well, kind of similar to Andy Clark. And, that's not but listen, folks, the sheriff don't need to tell us what to do regarding legal business. I'm talking about drug dealing. Legal business, they don't need to really be telling us what to do, period. Controversial, I guess, but that's my belief. I want to say, I know that Bill Ryan's a very popular candidate. I know a lot of people who are voting for him. And I think that he's probably one of the front runners. And I don't think he would be a bad sheriff. I really don't. I don't think he'd be a bad sheriff. But I would have appreciated him being a little bit stronger on some of those issues.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have anything to add to that, a different perspective? And by the way, my mother's not here because she agrees with me on everything. She might have some different opinions on stuff, and I know she knows behind the scenes we do have some different opinions. So, you can, if you see it differently, just let me know. Any more thoughts on Bill Ryan?
No.
Okay. Then we'll move on to our next candidate, Nick Duncan. You haven't seen anything on Facebook yet, have you? I haven't really gotten a check for anything there.
No questions.
Okay, no questions. Again, if you have any questions, if you're watching on Facebook, Sound of Truth Radio, please post those questions in the comments, and if we are able to, if we have the time, we will look to answer them. We're supposed to be going off the air in 3 minutes. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that, but we're going to try to be off. We have to be off by 6:30 because of other programming that is planned to schedule. And I'm just going to scroll down here real quick and make sure we don't have a script set for 6. All right, we are good. The next candidate we interviewed was Nick Duncan. Now, Nick Duncan became a sheriff's deputy, I believe he said, in 2014. So you got, I guess, about 10 years of experience there. Now, the first thing that I think everyone thinks of when they hear Nick Duncan is this is a guy who ran against Chuck Wright last time. Last year, Nick Duncan ran against the then incumbent Chuck Wright for sheriff of Spartanburg County. And I understand that's a problem for some voters. We've discussed Chuck Wright here tonight. There were a lot of good things about Chuck Wright. There were some things that I disagreed with. And I'll be completely honest. Last year was my first time voting for sheriff, and I voted for Nick Duncan. And that doesn't automatically mean I was going to vote for him again this year, because this year there's many candidates to choose from. And so I will say, when I did these interviews, I was undecided who I would vote for. I don't want you to think I was secretly trying to prop up one or another when I did the interviews. And I think I know now who I'm going to vote for. But when I was doing the interviews, I was undecided. But I did vote for Nick Duncan last time because I felt he gave a fresh perspective. It wasn't really not that I hated Chuck Wright. I know there are people who just foam at the mouth when they hear the name Chuck Wright because he's a conservative or because he said he loves God, and they're like, oh, he's hiding behind Christianity. That wasn't me, but I just wanted something a little bit fresh. So to be honest, and I know some of you are disappointed in me now, I'm sorry I let you down, but I did vote for Nick Duncan last year, and I think you would be wise to give him a second look beyond just, oh, he ran against Chuck Wright, I'm ruling him out. Look at what his ideas are, look at what his policies are, and don't, and maybe some of you, to you, it's a plus that he ran against Chuck Wright, maybe. But maybe you're thinking, I don't want to vote for him, he ran against Chuck Wright. Let me play for you the clip of him explaining to us why he ran against Chuck Wright, and then we'll talk about what answers he gave us to our policy questions, and maybe that'll give you an idea. Again, please don't just judge him on, well, he ran against Chuck Wright, I ain't going to vote for him. Look at what he believes. And give me a second here, and we will get this clip played of why, according to him, why he ran against Chuck Wright.
Sheriff Wright had been in office for about 20 years. I am a firm believer in term limits. I just my personal observation with all politicians.
All right, so it came down to term limits. That's what it came down to here for Nick. I apologize for the delay in getting back on here. But that's what it came down to, was term limits. Term limits was the reason that Nick Duncan gave us for why he ran against Chuck Wright for sheriff. I have to admit, I'm not as big on term limits as some people are, because we had term limits for president and we still got Obama and Biden. So I'm not convinced term limits fix everything, but to me, I understand that. And I would strongly recommend, I'm not telling you to vote for Nick Duncan, but I'm saying please don't just rule him out immediately because he ran against Chuck Wright. Look at where he stands on the issues. And if you don't like him after that, hey, that's fine. But let's not close the door on him just because he believes in term limits. I wouldn't consider that a good idea. You have anything to share that? Okay. Nick Duncan emphasizes being what he calls a constitutional sheriff, and I definitely want to play, let me see if I can find this right clip here. I want to play this clip to you of him talking about enforcement. I asked him questions about, we're talking about things like COVID. Okay, do you enforce lockdown orders? Do you enforce this mandate or that? And to me, the answer he gave was very, very strong. And in my opinion, Nick Duncan articulated perfectly what part of the role of a sheriff is. So this is Nick Duncan talking about enforcement, balance of powers. Let's listen to this clip here.
No, nothing guns or anything that goes against a citizen's rights, according to the Constitution, will be enforced from the federal government. If it's against your right as an American, then it should not be enforced. So the role of the sheriff is essentially to be the last line of defense against a higher government. And, the role of the sheriff is to protect the people, whether it's protect people from people or protect people from the government.
See, personally, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. He said a sheriff is to be the last line of defense against big government. And he said that the role of a sheriff is not just to protect people, but from government. Some of you are thinking, well, what does that mean? What that means is that a sheriff, his idea is that a sheriff can not enforce certain laws if they believe that it is too big government, if they believe that it's infringing on the rights of others. That's what he expressed. And just to be clear, Andy Clark expressed a very similar idea. I want to be fair to Andy Clark. I know I kind of said I called him a little bit weak earlier on certain things. And by the way, I'm not calling any of them weak as people. They've all served in law enforcement, so they're all heroes. But let me just say, we appreciate the service of every one of them. We appreciate our law enforcement officers, and I'm thankful for them putting their lives on the line for us. But as far as policy goes, I know I might have called Andy Clark a little bit weak, but he expressed a similar idea that the sheriff can decide what they want to enforce. And that might be controversial. I know some people say, and I've seen people attack Nick Duncan on this, they say, well, you got to enforce the law whether you like it or not. And there's some truth to that. You've got to maintain law and order. But when it comes to things like lockdowns, and he brought up, and you heard in that clip, he talked about gun regulations. The federal government says, no one can anymore have this type of weapon, and sheriffs, you got to go seize it. I would kind of like to have a sheriff who says, no, I'm not going to do that. I kind of like to have a sheriff who's going to stand up against big government and who's going to be kind of a check and balance. You know, the whole point of our Constitution was to be a system of checks and balances. And I kind of like a sheriff who's a part of that. And to me, Nick Duncan articulated that thought very, very well. Do you have anything to share there?
Right. I was going to say, there were prior to his interview, there were several candidates. We would go home every day after the interview and have a family discussion. As Matthew said, we don't always agree on every political issue, but we do agree on most things.
Right.
But we would go home and discuss. And actually, I have in my house this year, or this time, we'll have Matthew, Gabrielle, Jeremiah, and myself all voting. So there's 4 of us voting, and the whole family talks politics, even if they're not voting. And every time we would go home and we would discuss, and I would be like, well, they were okay on the lockdowns, the COVID thing, kind of like Matthew said a moment ago, weak, but okay, not bad, or, but then it was with this interview, and there were others after him, but I think at this point, this was like the first one that I was like, okay, thank you. Like, you hit the nail on the head. Like,
he said it the way we wanted him to say it, which is a little bit suspicious.
You had the strongest stand against it thus far. Like I said, I think there were some others after that might have had more of a strong stand as well.
Right.
But at that point, that was the strongest that we had heard, and it was like, you definitely got it.
Yeah. He was very strong on guns, and I'm looking at how little time we have here. I don't think I'm going to play that clip. I think I'm not going to do that one. But whereas we heard from, and again, let me just clarify, Nick Duncan is not the only one running saying I can choose what laws to enforce and not to enforce.
Right.
Andy Clark said the same thing.
Yeah.
The difference with Andy Clark is then he came in and said, we'll talk to them about how we can clean up and they can wear their mask, and Nick Duncan never said that.
I'll be honest, if somebody had come to your father and told him, we'll talk about how to clean the church and put on masks, he would have shut the door in their face, because he would not have gone along with that.
Here's the thing, we're going by what they said in the interview. I don't know what all they think.
Yeah.
Maybe Nick Duncan feels the exact same way as Andy Clark. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I know is what they said, and Nick Duncan did not have to follow up his statement with, we'll talk about how. So, but Andy Clark also says he believes he can enforce or not enforce certain things. And later, we'll get to some more candidates. Joseph Pilato, Rick Stevens, I think Adam Crisp also kind of expressed that idea. Actually, I know he did. Multiple other candidates expressed the idea that we can choose what to enforce and not to enforce. So Nick Duncan is not the only one, but to me, he articulated it so well, I definitely wanted to play that clip. Again, he was very strong on guns, whereas we heard from Randy Hollifield. He said for certain people they shouldn't carry, just get wasp spray. Nick Duncan said that everyone should carry, actually, and that's his belief. You may agree or disagree, so I am going to go to play that clip, because to me that was one of, if not the strongest answers that we got on guns. I think only Joseph Pilato's gun answer comes close to that, or maybe equals it, maybe even is better. But this is one of the best answers we got on guns, so here is Nick Duncan talking about that issue.
And I fully believe that everyone should have firearms. It is, it is a safety tool. It's a way for you to protect yourself, way for you to protect your family, way for you to protect others. Because not everybody believes in it, but sometimes they need it.
Sure.
So I feel like everyone should be able to protect themselves in any situation. And especially with law enforcement, we can't be everywhere all the time, like I said earlier. So, how long does it take for law enforcement to get to you wherever you're at? Could take 5 minutes if you're right up the road. Could take 20 minutes if everybody's tied up and doing something. But how long does it take for somebody to assault you? Right. And then, to end your life. So, I want everyone to protect themselves and be able to protect themselves.
All right, so that was Nick Duncan on guns. That's my stance. You might disagree with that, and you're welcome to disagree with me, but what he said is exactly what I would have said. Yeah. So that's my take there. I don't want to spend too much more time on Nick Duncan, because we've got a lot of other candidates to get to and less than 20 minutes to do it. But do you have anything else you wanted to share about him? All right, so again, my assessment is he was very strong on guns, on being a constitutional sheriff, He was also pretty good on civil asset forfeiture, I thought, his answer there. I will say maybe I didn't get as strong of an answer out of him about cost saving in the budget, as some of the candidates we'll get to later. But his answer there, I wouldn't say was bad, just maybe not as strong as I'd have wanted on that issue. But that's kind of my thoughts there. And I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. You make up your own mind, but we're just going to share with you some things that they've said to us in our interview. The next one we talked to was Joseph Pilato. He has law enforcement experience across the country. He served in Texas, Florida, and now in South Carolina. He's got, I think, about 30 years law enforcement experience overall. He's been here in Spartanburg since the late 2000s, serving with the Spartanburg City Police. You might have also seen him at the Beacon Drive-In, as he's worked, I guess, part-time, I don't know, but he's worked there as well. And that's when he announced he was running. I looked at his picture. I said, hold up. I've seen that guy at the Beacon, and we love the Beacon Drive-In, and good friends over there. So let's talk about this candidate now running for sheriff, Mr. Joseph Pilato, again, officer at Spartanburg City Police for many years, and maybe you've seen him at the Beacon. Joseph Pilato is pretty unique in that his campaign strongly emphasizes Christianity. I guess you could say Bill Ryan kind of does as well. But to Joseph Pilato, it goes to the point that his signs, many of them have crosses on them. I'm not saying that's a must for a candidate. I'm not saying that makes or breaks a candidacy. But you know what? I appreciate it.
Right.
I appreciate a cross on a sign. I appreciate that Joseph Pilato is the only candidate from what I've seen, and definitely the only one in our interviews, I know that for sure, to voluntarily bring up the abortion issue. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't have a question in there about the abortion issue for this reason. There are no laws right now in South Carolina like forcing us to be pro-choice. Mm-hmm. We also don't have laws as much pro-life as we should be. There's no murder mills in Spartanburg County. There's currently no abortion. Mm-hmm. I think the closest abortion clinic is in Greenville.
Right.
So that's why I didn't have a question in there about abortion. Maybe I should have had one in there about it. But to me, I think it's a very relevant issue. Mm-hmm. But the sheriff can't make the laws on it, and there's not technically any abortion. I mean, there might be abortions happening in Spartanburg, but not in a clinic that you can go and shut down or anything like that. But he brought it up voluntarily, so I want to play this clip. This is him talking about being pro-life, but also he talks about what we just listened to Nick Duncan talking about. Again, this is Joseph Pilato. I'm about to play this clip from. He talks here about how he believes as sheriff he can choose what laws to enforce. And he gives you his idea of how he would make that decision. So here we go with Joseph Pilato talking about laws, enforcement, and listen to how he himself, and I didn't prompt him for this, but he brought up the abortion issue all on his own. Here is Joseph Pilato.
Our laws are God's first, the federal and states second and third, meaning there shouldn't be a conflict. For example, abortion. I am very pro-life. Mm-hmm. If you turned around and told me that I have to submit myself beneath a law that says it's okay to have abortions on demand, the taxpayers got to fund it, and we should start arresting people left and right because they're out in front of the clinics, as they used federal laws to do, and arrest them under a RICO statute. Absolutely not. I refuse to go in that realm because that law of God's, when it comes to the unborn and shedding that innocent blood, we have no right to turn around and look the other way.
I'm not going to lie. After he said that, I thought to myself, man, I should have asked everyone else about abortion. But the problem is, he's bringing up a hypothetical. And there's no abortion clinic in Spartanburg County right now, but if there was an abortion clinic here, and if the state government or federal government said, hey, you've got to stop people from protesting at it, that's a hypothetical. I could ask if I asked everyone a hypothetical, they probably would have said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. It wouldn't have been sincere, but he brought it up himself. So I believe it's sincere that it's a hypothetical that I don't think is going to happen. I don't think we'll see a new abortion clinic open in Spartanburg over the next few years. Yeah. At least I sure pray not. But in that hypothetical, he's going to let you protest at it.
Yeah. I will say this, and we didn't ask this question, so it's just a question that just came to my head.
Sure.
I will say, I did like how he said God's laws first. Like,
yes.
that did, like, he hit a home run with me when he said that. But... like, speaking about, looking at the thing about the abortion clinic and him saying he wouldn't arrest somebody for protesting and so forth, it reminded me of, we knew a situation a few years ago where some preachers were downtown during the Pride thing that they have every year in downtown Spartanburg, and they were just standing there preaching, and I think they were using a blowhorn or whatever, saying, you know, repent and so forth. And I saw the video footage of the city police that were there trying to tell them to stop and that they were going to be arrested if they continued and so forth. And so, like, you know, to me, that's kind of a similar situation. I mean, again, this has to do with God's law as far as, you know, homosexuality and what they're involved in. So, like, what would his take be there? And again, he didn't answer that question because we didn't ask it. But, yeah, I think it would be a similar situation.
So Andy Clark and Nick Duncan call themselves constitutional sheriffs, and so does Rick Stevens, who we're going to get to next. Actually, I think I've heard people say that every candidate has claimed they're constitutional candidate, or constitutional sheriff. But anyway, that they didn't all say that in our interviews. With Joseph Pilato, I think is interesting. His number one law is not the Constitution.
Right.
It's God's law.
Yeah.
Is that better? Yes, but also, how is he interpreting God's law?
That's true.
From what I know of him, I think pretty solidly.
Yeah.
But it is a question to ask. You know, how are you interpreting it? But anyway, I will say he also gave a very strong answer on guns, and we're running so low on time, I cannot play all these clips that I had. I prepared 41 clips, if you can believe that. But we can't play them all because of time. He was very strong on guns. In fact, he said something no one else did. He said, you know what, I am just going to play it. I'm just going to play this one because no one else said it, and it's shocking, but in a good way. So real quick, let me play one more clip from Joseph Pilato. Get this tuned up here. All right, here we go.
There's not enough officers. I am thrilled when a citizen comes up behind me knowing I'm getting my rear end kicked, and they're there to support me, and they got a gun on their side, because if I'm wrestling and they need to do what they need to do to protect me, I'm all for it.
Look, no one else said, I appreciate it when you're carrying a gun and I'm in trouble, you can come help me. Honestly, I don't know that many other cops would say that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that many people in law enforcement, but I feel like that's a very rare take to say, I want you to carry and I want you to help me if I need it.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. It's honest, it's real, and it's not that tells me Joseph Pilato will not be a sheriff who sees you carrying a gun and says, oh gosh, or who says you should buy some wasp spray, Randy Hollifield. But he looks at you carrying a gun and he says, thank you. If there's a problem here, maybe you can help out.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Now, there is one thing that I do have to ding Joseph Pilato on. I'm not going to play the clip for the sake of time. But when I asked him about civil asset forfeiture, he said, yeah, we're going to take their stuff. Now, I want to be clear. He didn't necessarily say we're going to do it without due process. Okay? It's not that he said, yeah, we're just going to take all that we can for profit, but he just didn't give me the kind of answer. Nick Duncan had given a pretty good answer where he said, if we just find cash, we're not taking it. I didn't feel like Joseph Pilato gave me as strong of an answer there. And that's, for me personally, is one of my biggest issues there, is that I don't think he understands the Fourth Amendment concerns enough with that issue. But otherwise, personally, we're not telling you who to vote for. I thought a very strong candidate. And really, that's the one ding that I have against him. Also, when we asked him about budget, and I forgot to even get a clip on this, but he was very strong on that issue too, if I recall correctly. And he's very hard against county council and making sure that they spend money properly. I think I should have gotten this clip, because if I recall correctly, he said we need to stop spending so much money on all this other junk and spend it on the sheriff's office. And Joseph Pilato has actually endorsed a candidate for county council that he thinks is going to go do that, is going to go stop spending money on extra junk and spend it just on the sheriff's office. Joseph Pilato has endorsed Brian Alverson for county council in the election happening on the same day. By the way, we don't all vote for county council, only some of us do, so you might not have to worry about that. But if you like Joseph Pilato for sheriff, you might like Brian Alverson for county council. I don't know, but I know that Pilato likes Brian and is pretty good on saying, hey, we're not going to have to raise taxes, we just need to cut the overspending. I thought he was very solid. That civil asset forfeiture stuff, to me, if you don't see the issue there, then I've got an issue with you. So that's my one ding against him, kind of. You have any other thoughts there?
No, I thought he was a good candidate, absolutely.
Okay. Next one we interviewed was Rick Stevens. Now, Rick Stevens has probably one of the most unique backgrounds of anyone who's running because he served with federal law enforcement. He's been with the Secret Service. He's been with the State Department. He's been with the UN. He has gone overseas, and what he says that he's done, I don't know his whole record, but he says he's gone and basically worked with kind of like mafia-style stuff over there and try to fight against that kind of crime. So he has a very, very extensive resume. He served for many, many years, and he did serve on the sheriff's office. He did serve here. So he's from Spartanburg County. He served in Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office when he was younger, and then went around the world doing all sorts of things. So his emphasis in his campaign is on being a constitutional sheriff. He uses that same term Nick Duncan, Andy Clark, and some of the others use. But a huge thing for him is fighting the cartels. And he actually told us that he lost, I think it was a nephew, to fentanyl. And so he's very hard against ending the trafficking of fentanyl in and through Spartanburg County. And that was probably one of the words he said the most in our interview was fentanyl. But it's because he's listen, I'm not trying to be funny. He's passionate about it. At least he seems to be. You know, we're taking them at their word.
Yeah, I'll say after his interview, I was sitting there like, okay, what he said was really good about these things. And I was like, I want to go back and redo all the other interviews and kind of drill them on this, because this was definitely some of the things he said about the drug problem. It was very good.
Right. Look, we didn't have time to ask everyone everything because we only had hour-long interviews. So we didn't get to ask everyone about fentanyl, but for Rick Stevens, that kind of is his banner issue, is cracking down on that, cracking down on the cartels. And he says that it's all coming from Mexico, and it's also linked to China, and he says he wants to crack down on that. However, one of the ways that Chuck Wright has said he was going to crack down on drugs is Operation Rolling Thunder. Rick Stevens said he did not support Operation Rolling Thunder. And he gave me, again, you could tell that's kind of a personal issue to me, not because I've ever been pulled over, don't misunderstand, but it's just, to me, it's very serious. The government taking stuff from people. He gave me, I think, the strongest answer on that. So real quick, I want to play to you, actually, I would say the second strongest answer. Adam Chris might have been the strongest. But here was Rick Stevens' answer on the Constitution, constitutional rights, and Operation Rolling Thunder.
As a constitutional sheriff, which I'm running as a constitutional sheriff, and I'm 100% behind that.
Yeah.
One of the biggest responsibilities I have is to protect the citizens of Spartanburg County from violation of Fourth Amendment. Now, you've heard me get up on TV, you've heard me on platform, and I'm the only one at this point who's done it. I am against Rolling Thunder because, in my opinion, that is against the Fourth Amendment of the people in Spartanburg County.
Up to that point, no one else said it that forcefully. No one else just straight up said, that's wrong.
Right.
Now, you might not agree that it's wrong, but personally, I do. That's just me personally. You don't have to agree with me. I appreciate Rick Stevens taking that stand. Now, let me see. Again, Joseph Pilato didn't have much of an issue. Andy Clark said we should just do it less often. I forgot about Randy Hollifield. I did not get to ask Randy Hollifield that question, but he was actually one of the guys who started Operation Rolling Thunder. So I didn't get to ask him that, but there's that. Bill Ryan told me I don't really have a stance on that as we played the clip. Nick Duncan did say that he thought we could do it a different way from Rolling Thunder. I didn't get to play that clip, but he said we should focus not on the interstates, but on other ways of tracking down drugs. Rick Stevens wants to go very hard on the drugs, but according to him, and we're taking him at his word, he might be lying to us, but according to him, not in a way that violates our Fourth Amendment rights. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that stance. We only have 7 minutes left, so I can't talk much more about Rick Stevens. But another big thing I want to say, I will play just this one more clip from him. He has an idea for cutting fat out of the budget and using it to fund deputy pay raises. Instead of us having to do a tax raise or something, just cutting fat out of the budget. So real quick, here's Rick Stevens talking about that.
Right. So we need to take the budget as it stands, cut the fat off, and reallocate. And there's a lot of waste in that budget I've seen. A lot. And I'm not going to go into that right now. I will before the campaign's over. But there's a lot of waste that we need to do. And before we go to county council and start saying we need more money.
So Rick Stevens says that he's already gotten a copy of the budget. He's got it on his desk. He's looking through it, and there's fat. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't have the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office budget, but I appreciate, I think Randy Hollifield said something to the effect to, well, once we cut it, we're never going to get that money back, which to me implied I don't want to cut anything. But Rick Stevens is looking at stuff and saying, hey, we can save money here, and we can reallocate that money to pay our deputies better. I believe our deputies should be paid better, but I don't want to see a tax raise on the people of Spartanburg to do that. I like that idea. So I was personally very, very pleased with Rick Stevens. I had a little bit of concern when I knew he was so hard on fentanyl because not because I want to be easy on fentanyl, but because I thought, okay, is he going to be so hard on fentanyl that he tramples our rights while trying to fight fentanyl? Because that happens sometimes. The government is so focused on fighting drugs or fighting COVID that they just trample everyone's rights while doing so. But to me, he seemed very serious about doing it while also protecting the people's rights. So I was pretty pleased. Did you have any thoughts to share about that? Okay, we only got 5 minutes left, and we got 3 candidates left to go. So let's do this quickly if we can. The next one was Rusty Clevenger. You all know Rusty Clevenger. He needs no introduction. He has been coroner of Spartanburg County for the past 16 years. He emphasizes that. His signs say on them, experience matters. And that's his big thing, is that he is experienced. He also used to be a deputy, so he does know, I would suppose, his way around the sheriff's office. I have to admit to you guys, I didn't get that many clips from Rusty because, or I shouldn't say Rusty, I apologize, from the coroner, from Mr. Clevenger. I didn't get that many clips. Because, to be honest, he didn't say very much to me that stood out, positive or negative. I'm just going to be honest. You know what? I'm going to be very honest here. I have concerns that Rusty Clevenger is too tied in with the establishment. I'm not just saying same old as Chuck Wright. I'm saying I have concerns. I have serious concerns. I don't know how deep this Chuck Wright corruption stuff goes, or if it's even true. I don't know. But I have concerns, and I'm just going to be honest with you. Rusty Clevenger on his website, it's interesting. He talks about things on his website, and then when I asked him about it in the interview, the answers almost didn't line up. On his website, he talks about efficiency. I asked him what that meant. I thought that would mean ways we can maybe save money, streamline certain processes. And basically he said, well, efficiency means that we do a better job retaining our deputies. And I agree that that's a very important thing. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm kind of like, okay, that's not what we were looking for. He says he has a new vision for Spartanburg. You ask him what the new vision is, and immediately the first thing he said was, well, the new vision is really an old vision. So let me just play that clip here real quick about efficiency, as I do want to get Rusty's voice on here, and then we'll probably just go to move on because we were so low on time. But here we go really quick with Rusty Clevenger.
That is what I'm calling the efficient part of it. And it being efficient, we also need to make sure that if a call comes in, that a citizen, especially on a violent crime case, because we're short, is not waiting on an officer, say if they're on the Moore area and they're waiting on a deputy to come from the Una area. That's near impossible. And we need to be able to have deputies in these areas to cover, and those expectations be met. So when I talk about efficient, that's what I'm talking about.
I mean, I'm not saying what he said was wrong. He's right. We need to do a better job of getting the deputies out there. We need to have more deputies. He's right. But it's just, I feel like not quite as advertised. Efficiency, and then it comes down to, we just need to pay the deputies more. Because I'm looking for ways, I agree we should pay the deputies more, but I'd like to hear from the candidates how we could save money in other areas. And he didn't really have many ideas on that. I asked him more directly about cost effectiveness, and he talked about how they recently cut the helicopter out of the budget. He said we should put it back in. In other words, spend more money. But you know what? Maybe we do need a helicopter. But then he said, well, I would look at the different ways we're using it, and maybe we can save some money there with the usage. So to me, not very revolutionary. And I apologize if you're a big Rusty Clevenger fan. I know he's got a lot of fans just because of his name recognition. But I just... I will say this, he said he was a big Second Amendment guy, and I thought his gun answer was very solid. I will say that. He said that that's one of the best things Chuck Wright did as sheriff, was be very pro-gun. So, I think he's solid on that issue, but to be honest, I really wasn't sold on most of his answers. Do you have anything to share about, or any thoughts, any perspectives on Rusty Clevenger? Okay. Is there anything else I need to talk about with him? Because I don't want to just seem I'm being totally unfair, not giving him a lot of time. And I know he's probably the front runner in this race just because of his name recognition, but I just didn't get a whole lot out of my conversation with him as far as any good ideas and his lockdown answer about COVID. I just wasn't quite as strong as I wanted it to be, and to be honest, there was a point in the interview where it kind of sounded like he was blaming people who didn't get the vaccine and died. It almost sounded like he was blaming them for not getting the vax, that they died with COVID, and that just. And I feel for him because his dad died with COVID, if I understood correctly. So I don't want to talk about that too much because I know it's very personal to him. And again, we honor all these people for their service. I respect Rusty Clevenger for his service to my county. And I told him that when he was here. And I told him, I've been hearing your name my whole life because he's been coroner since I was, 6 years old. I respect him, but I just... I didn't get quite the answers out of him that I was wanting to get.
Right.
I would have loved if I could have voted for Rusty Clevenger for sheriff, but as it stands, I just don't think I can. All right. Oh, gosh, we're out of time. We got 2 more candidates left to go. I'm going to really, really hurry. Try to. Robert Cheeks. Robert Cheeks is the next one that we interviewed. He has been with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office since 2016. Prior to that, he was with Spartanburg City. To be honest, I don't have a whole lot of clips for Robert Cheeks either. I don't mean to be, I know I sound so biased, but there wasn't a whole lot to me that stood out there either. Let's play his stance on guns. Let's play that real quick. I think that was maybe one of the most interesting points from him for me. And you could tell I'm trying to hurry. It's because we're over time. I'm sorry. But real quick, let's listen to Robert Cheeks talk about the gun issue.
I've got a lot of guns. And it's not to sensationalize firearms and the violence that comes along with people using firearms, because I think that's a real problem within our community. But me, my family, we all believe in the right to bear arms.
Do you have safety concerns about current gun law? Do you think current gun law in this state is sufficient?
I do have some safety concerns. You'd be surprised the number of calls that we get from people who are not trained with their firearm, who don't spend the time to make themselves familiar, who shoot themselves.
Now, look, him saying, I've got a lot of guns, I like that. I really do. I like, and I remember sitting there in the interview with him, he leaned forward in the couch, and he got a little bit of a smirk on his face. He said, I own a lot of guns. I was thinking, oh yeah, brother. I like that. However, I asked him if he had any safety concerns about the current gun law, and he said yes. And most of the candidates, most of them, said that they had concerns in the sense that they wanted people trained. So that's not really unique to Robert Cheeks, but it did... The quickness with which he said, yes, I have some concerns, is a little bit different from some of the other candidates. Some of the other candidates said, no, the gun law is fine, just make sure you're trained. He came out immediately with have some concerns. And if you watch the whole interview, if you go on past that clip, he talked about he saw someone like open carrying, wearing clothes that weren't good for that, and how that scared him so much. It just, I don't know. It seemed a little bit, obviously he likes guns, but I don't want to try to discern the feelings of his heart, but I'm not sure how enthusiastic he is about other people having guns. But not a bad answer. I'm going to be honest. I had heard rumors, you've probably heard them too, about Robert Cheeks being liberal and this and that, and he might be, but I was pretty pleased with the answers he gave me in the interview. I'm just going to be honest with you. I was pleased. I will play his civil asset forfeiture answer real quick. Did I get a clip for that? Yes, I did. Because he brought up voluntarily the Ford Raptor that Chuck Wright took in civil asset forfeiture and made his truck. Now, I will say Robert Cheeks didn't say, like Rick Stevens, we shouldn't be doing that, that's wrong. But he said, let's be more due process centered with that. So I like that answer. Here we go with Robert Cheeks, another clip from him.
The biggest thing, and we talked about it before, we don't want to do anything within our right to violate anybody else's right. So I think one of the biggest things it began a few years ago when he first got that blue Ford Raptor. That asset forfeiture came up, the way it was handled, how fast it went through the court process, and then looking back on it now, there's some things that have been revealed about that. Yeah. But it comes down to doing the right thing. I believe there are people that are doing things illegal in this county that are gaining in surplus off of that illegal activity? Absolutely. Do I feel like that there are things that, if going through the legal process, that can be a part of the asset forfeiture that could make less of a burden on taxpayers? Absolutely. But it's all about doing it the right way.
Maybe a little vague, maybe a little weak, but I think he saw some of the concerns that some of us have about civil asset forfeiture Operation Rolling Thunder. And he didn't totally denounce it like someone like Rick Stevens did. So I want to say this. As a person, Robert Cheeks was awesome to talk with before and after the interview. And again, as I say, for all the candidates, I appreciate their service. I want to be clear on that. They are all braver men than me because of the way they put their lives on the line for our community, or they have in the past anyway. So I'm thankful for all of them. I don't have much more to say about Lieutenant Cheeks. Honestly, I feel that we did ask him, of course, a constitutional question, and all the answers I feel like were kind of vague enough where I can't honestly say I got much good or bad out of it. Just to be honest with you, I didn't hear there were. Robert Cheeks didn't say too much that like got my antenna turned on. Like, whoop, that's a red flag. But I can't give you a clip like I could for some of the other candidates where he says something that was like really solid and on point. I don't know, but I know some people have the idea Robert Cheeks is like the worst candidate here. I'm not sure that I see that, but I didn't get quite some of the answers I was hoping for personally. You have anything to share about that?
No.
Okay, and I feel so bad doing this because I've met all these guys in person, so I just feel like I'm betraying every one of them. They were all
very nice.
They were all polite, and again, some of them just like, I was like, man, let's hang out after this. And I'm
right,
kidding.
some
I
of them
didn't
really
say
great
that.
people that you
Absolutely
would enjoy spending time with.
But I have a duty to you, the listener, to just tell you, hey, this is what we got out of them. And maybe for someone didn't get as much substance as others. Okay, we're way over time. Our last candidate was Adam Crisp. Adam Crisp has, and I forgot to look up his whole resume before coming on here. Again, you can watch the whole interview to see everything that he said. But he did serve with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office. He's been away from there for many years and has been serving on the Lyman Town Council. He's also been an executive at a security company. So he's got a security company. He used to be a deputy. He's been on Lyman Town Council. He ran for State House last year, and to be honest, he ran for State House against one of the most conservative State House members that we have. I don't know how many of you follow State House politics, but Rob Harris is a very conservative member. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything, but he's definitely, especially on the abortion issue, Rob Harris is a very solid representative. And so coming into this election, the only thing I really knew about Adam Crisp is he ran against Rob Harris. I'm just going to have to be honest. That was a little bit of a turnoff for me. My interview with him, I was pleasantly surprised. Because I'm coming into it thinking, okay, this guy ran against one of our most conservative state legislators. And I still believe that was a mistake. He shouldn't have run against Rob Harris. Again, not saying Rob Harris is perfect or I agree with him on everything, but pretty solid legislator. I still think that was a mistake, but I'm thinking he's going to be, so liberal and moderate. He gave me some really solid answers in the interview.
He did.
Now, I think a concern some have with Adam Crisp, maybe not as much experience as others. He hasn't been in law enforcement for a little while, and he didn't serve for that long. Now, he does have a law enforcement heritage. His father, I think, brother, grandfather, he's got a history of law enforcement in the family. I was very pleased with some of his answers. I'm just about out of time, but let me play you some of his answers, and you'll see what I'm talking about with them being, surprisingly solid, more than I thought they would be. I was really pleasantly surprised with Adam Crisp. I did not expect to enjoy interviewing him and enjoy the answers he gave as much as I did. First, let's talk about, how about civil asset forfeiture? That's been where some candidates were kind of weak for me. I want you to hear what Adam Crisp had to say because it's shocking just how blunt it was. You'll see what I mean here. Here's Adam Crisp.
Right. Now, civil, I do not believe in that. The forfeiture,
Right.
that is a tough topic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And that is stealing from people. Okay? And I think it's unethical.
That is stealing from people. He just straight up said that's stealing from. He said that's a tough topic, and I was expecting to say that he's going to kind of give him a little moderate stance. He says that's stealing from people. And I'm like, okay. Now look, there are times where the government needs to take property from people, right? There are times as a punishment for a crime or as evidence in a crime. So I want to be clear. I'm not saying the government can never take anything from people. Sometimes you got to, but I appreciate that perspective of we need to not steal from people. He said that he believes that any law that he doesn't agree with or that... So here we got Nick Duncan, Andy Clark, and I have heard, now they didn't all say this in my interview, I've heard everyone says they're a constitutional sheriff, and everyone, when I asked them, would you enforce the Constitution, they said yes. But, some went into more detail than others. I know Nick Duncan, Andy Clark say... constitutional sheriff. Nick Duncan says if it doesn't fit the Constitution, I'm not going to enforce it. Joseph Pilato says if it doesn't work with God's law, I'm not going to enforce it. Adam Crisp said to me it's interesting the choice of words. He says if it's unethical, he will not enforce it. So let me real quick play that clip from Adam Crisp, talk about his beliefs of laws that he can choose whether or not to enforce.
But as the sheriff, I don't have to enforce any law that I think is unethical or that can hurt the county in any way.
Now, some would think this is a point against Adam Crisp. Oh, he's not going to enforce the law. He doesn't really care about law and order. But again, we need the sheriff to be a check and balance. I'm not saying I want the sheriff to be the dictator and decide everything, but I'm saying that if the state government or if the national government passes down a law that is tyrannical, yes, I want a sheriff to say, yeah, we're not doing that here. I know some people would say, well, that's just anarchy, that's chaos, but yeah, I want a sheriff who's going to say, sorry, we're not going to do that here. And that's what Adam Crisp said that he would do. Again, all of these guys, we're assuming they're sincere.
Yeah.
We don't really know, and again, I had concerns about Adam Crisp going into this because of who he ran against literally just last year. That wasn't a long time ago, it was just last year. He mentioned in the interview his political mentors, Rita Allison. She used to be a state house member before Rob Harris actually ran against her. She was more of a moderate type. I don't think she was very strong on constitutional carry in the state house. That's his mentor. I have some questions about that. I have some concerns. But what he told me in the interview, very solid. His stance on guns, very, very solid. Again, what he said about enforcing, about civil asset forfeiture, very solid. And he had a pretty similar idea to Rick Stevens about the budget. So this will be the last clip we play. Here's Adam Crisp talking about the budget, taxes, fiscal conservatism.
Then what you do is you look at that budget and say, okay, we have a certain amount of money that we're spending that's not going straight to the community or to the deputies, right, to the deputies, right, paper, stuff like that, stuff that really hold high on the priority list. So you take that money, and I'm looking around probably $2 or $3 million that you play around with. Well, that $2 or $3 million you can either do two things with. That money's already in the budget. That money has already been taxed. So we don't have to ask the taxpayers because you've already paid that. So you have
all right, I'm going to go ahead and fade that clip out. It wasn't over, but it looks like I made an editing error because it was kind of echoing. So I apologize for that. That was a mistake in my editing. But to summarize what he said there, and I hope you were able to understand it over the issues with the echoing, is that he thinks there's kind of similar to what Rick Stevens said. Rick Stevens called it fat. He thinks there's money in the budget. He claims about $2 million. I don't know where he got the figure from. But he says about $2 million that we can move away from certain things in the budget and put it towards deputy pay raises. Now, because I haven't seen the budget, I don't really know if that's a good idea. If he's going to pull away money from things that are really essential, that's bad. But I prefer a sheriff who wants to try those sorts of things rather than a candidate who just says, yeah, we'll raise your taxes.
Right.
Or deflects and says, well, I'll let county council figure out how to fund it. Right. That's what Robert Cheeks told me. There's another thing about Robert Cheeks. I asked him about, the taxes. He said, well, I'm going to let the people running for county council answer that question. Okay, I asked you, but sure, we'll let the county council people answer it. I understand it's not the sheriff's job to fund the office. That's county council's job. But I also know, sheriff candidates, don't lie to me. I know that behind the scenes, the county council people are going to ask you your opinion. I know they're going to ask you if you think they need that, if you think you need more money or not. And I know that when the people of Spartanburg go to vote on a tax increase, they're going to listen to see if the sheriff thinks we need one or not. So stop pretending. Some of these sheriff candidates, they try to do that. They pretend like, well, this is for county council to decide. Honey, I know, but I also know that you have a bully pulpit as sheriff. You have influence, and what you say is going to matter to people, including those on council.
Right.
So that's it. Those are all the candidates we interviewed. I'm sorry that this lasted so long. We went way over time. I apologize. But we will get back to regularly scheduled programming at 7 o'clock. Any final thoughts you wanted to share, Mother? Anything about Adam Crisp? I guess we didn't discuss him maybe as much.
I was going to say, I know Crisp and I know Duncan both were for term limits. I can't remember if anybody else was that way or not. But, you know, I'd say, like, but there was, I do remember there was one candidate, and I can't remember which one, that was saying that they thought, and this was in a private conversation, I think, between us and them, and this was not meant to be down on Sheriff Wright, but they were saying that sometimes the longer you're in a position, that opens you up to problems that maybe were not there in earlier years or so forth, that you're just kind of setting yourself up for trouble. And so, like, I know at least those two were like, we don't need to be in office that long. And that was, to me, like something that I thought, you know, that's probably a good idea. I mean, and I don't know which of the candidates were kind of like, hey, I'm just going to sit in this for as many years as they vote me in, or which ones were kind of like, I'm just want to be there for a brief season. And, you know, it's not something that I have a strong stand on, but it is something that does make me stop and think that, you know, maybe it is a good idea not to have someone there too long, because that is a lot of pressure for someone to be under for a long term. And I guess it does kind of open you up to the possibility of getting stuff he shouldn't get into.
Yeah, I don't know where all the candidates stand on that. Honestly, I think that having Chuck Wright as sheriff for so long and then it ending the way it did, I think the people of Spartanburg probably don't want another 20-year sheriff.
Right.
So I think whoever is elected probably is not going to be sheriff for as long as Chuck Wright.
Right.
I don't think the people will want that. But you're right. Nick Duncan and Adam Crisp, I think, were the only ones that discussed that in the interview anyway. Yeah. Other candidates might have discussed it on other interviews, but with us, I think it was just Nick Duncan and Adam Crisp, and they both said, I think 2 terms for both of them, and then they would be done.
Yep.
All right. What are we looking for in a sheriff? I'd love someone who's a Christian. You can go watch the full interviews to see each of their testimonies. Some of this is very good stuff there. Even some of the candidates I might have kind of ragged on a little bit today had really good testimonies. I'm serious. I'm not just saying that. I'm serious. I want to be clear again. I appreciate all of their service, and I really appreciate them being willing to come on the radio station. And I'm not trying to just drag certain ones and lift up others. I'm just trying to let you kind of maybe get a better assessment of them. Final thoughts from me, and we're going to have to close. You know, I think, honestly, I think no matter who we elect, I think most of these guys will be as good as Chuck Wright was, if not better. Maybe that's a bold statement to make, but I don't think we have too many, maybe not even any, running who are like going to be these horrible, awful sheriffs. Because I don't think Chuck Wright was perfect. So, but I do think he was pretty good. I think we've got some really good opportunities here. We've got some candidates here that have some really fresh ideas. I like Chuck Wright, or I did for many years. I've had some issues with him. I've had issues, but I appreciate a lot of what he did. But I like some of these fresh ideas that we're getting. And personally, I want to vote for a fresh candidate. I know some people want to vote for Rusty Clevenger or Randy Hollifield because they're maybe more Chuck Wright connected, to be honest with you. I kind of like these people with some fresh ideas personally. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I will say I like several of these candidates, and let me say this, liking several of them is a good thing because we're probably going to have 2 elections. The first one we vote for our first pick out of this whole field of 9, and then 2 weeks later we go vote again between the top 2. So if you like several, maybe the one your first choice doesn't make to the top 2, maybe your second choice does. maybe your third choice makes it the top 2. So if you can have kind of a ranking in your head of these candidates, that'll help you be ready for the runoff. So I like several of these guys. You don't have to say who you're voting for, but I will say personally, I believe, and it's close between several of these, but I believe I'll be voting for Nick Duncan. I think, to me, he articulated best being a constitutional sheriff. I think he was very good about not wanting the government to just get all up in your business, and I appreciate that. I think Rick Stevens was very strong for me because he's very tough on the budget. Adam Crisp, I had some issues with coming into this, but his interview is very, very strong. Joseph Pilato, excellent. Again, my one big issue there is just I didn't think he was strong enough with civil asset forfeiture. And if he had given me a different answer there, maybe he'd be my number one. I don't know. So I think we have several good candidates. There are some I would definitely not recommend. You can rewatch this whole program to guess who those are. I respect all of them, but there are some that I just really I don't. They didn't give me the kind of. They're not. I'll put it this way. I don't think they're going to be the kind of sheriff that I really want. Nice people, and I respect them for their bravery in law enforcement, but not maybe who I want to vote for. Personally, I believe I'm going to be going for Nick Duncan, but I would if maybe some of you are like, well, Nick's too young, I'd say look at Rick Stevens, look at Joseph Pilato. If you're wanting someone more older, more experienced, if you're okay with a younger guy, I'd go probably Nick Duncan, or maybe Adam Crisp. That's my personal take. But we have several good candidates here. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just trying to lay out for you some of the facts, and then, I'm just going to tell you my opinion. By the way, the radio station is not endorsing anyone. This is a nonprofit radio station. We're not endorsing anybody. This is just Matthew Corbin personally. Most likely I will be voting for Nick Duncan. But I like several of them, and we'll see what happens. Do you want to share who you think you're voting for? If you want to keep that private, you can. But if you wanted to, I'll give you the chance.
I think the 4 that you named are, to me, the top that I would choose from. Okay. I am currently leaning towards Duncan, but I think Pilato is my second choice, even though I know he's not your second. I think he's my second. I'm just... Yeah.
I respect Pilato. And I have to say, I saw Pilato in person just a couple days ago, and he's he talks about the Lord all the time, and I so appreciate that. I have to be honest, that civil asset forfeiture thing, I didn't get what I wanted from him out of that. Yep. But very solid candidate otherwise.
Yeah, but yeah, I think we have some great candidates. I think we have some okay candidates. I do have maybe 1 or 2 that I'm kind of like,
You want to say who they are? Okay. Well, look, I'm going to say Randy Hollifield, great guy, but that wasp spray comment, it just lingers in my head. And I'm going to say again, I've really got concerns about Rusty Clevenger, and I didn't get a whole lot of substance out of him in the interview. So I will say that. Okay. I hope I haven't just burned a whole bunch of bridges, and I hope the next sheriff doesn't come after me. I'm serious. They could try to, hopefully none of them are that way, but you never know. Someone get elected sheriff and remember the bad things they said about them during the campaign and go after our church. So I hope not, but I have to tell you the truth. Be sure to vote August 5th. I'm sorry we went so long today. God bless you all. Thank you for listening and putting up with us. I'm sorry that we've run into your dinner time, but God bless you, and go vote August 5th, and then maybe even vote again on August 19th for the runoff. You pray about it. Don't just go off of my word. Please don't. Please don't just say, well, Matthew's voting for so-and-so, so I'm going to. Don't. Pray, study, research for yourself. If you vote for a different person than I do, that's fine. That's fine. Pray about it. Research. Go watch the full interviews if you haven't to get even more information. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for listening today. And let me get a song pulled up here. We will see you guys next time. We love you. God bless you. And let's pray for Spartanburg. Let's pray for a good new sheriff, whoever it might be. And whoever gets elected, even if we didn't like them that much, whoever gets elected, let's pray for God to be with them, to protect them, and to use them.
When God dips his pin of love in my heart and writes my soul a message, he wants me to know. Well, his spirit sinful heart of mine. Oh, when God gives His love in my heart. Well, I said I wouldn't tell it to a living soul, how He brought salvation and He made me whole. But I found I couldn't hide such love as Jesus did impart. 'Cause it makes me laugh and it makes me cry. He sets my happy soul on fire. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart. He walked every step of Calvary's rugged way to give His life completely and bring a brighter day. My life was steeped in sin, but in love He took me in. His blood washed away every stain. Well, I said I wouldn't tell it to a living soul, how He brought salvation and He made me whole. But I found I couldn't hide such love as Jesus did impart. 'Cause it makes me laugh and it makes me cry. He sets my happy soul on fire. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart. Well, I said I wouldn't tell it to a living soul, how He brought salvation and He made me whole. But I found I couldn't hide such love as Jesus did impart. 'Cause it makes me laugh, it makes me cry. He sets my happy soul on fire. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart. Well, I said I wouldn't tell it to a living soul, how He brought salvation and He made me whole. But I found I couldn't hide such love as Jesus did impart. 'Cause it makes me laugh, it makes me cry. He sets my happy soul on fire. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart. Hallelujah, when God gives His love in my heart.
Wait just a minute. Wait just a minute. When God dipped His love
in my heart and He writes my soul a message He wants me to know. His Spirit all divine fills this sinful heart of mine. When God gives His love in my heart. Well, I said I wouldn't tell it to a living soul, how He brought salvation